Yeah, sorry about the picture. That's me standing in the courtyard in San Francisco, somewhere in the Mission District. I have never given this talk before, so you'll have to bear with me. I'll have to look at my notes and run around a bit. So who am I? I'm Thomas. My background is in software engineering. I've also done some user experience design, and then I had kind of to learn marketing without actually wanting to do it. So I'm interested in like who considers himself herself a software developer, software background. Cool, okay. Design background. Who has ever written a line of code? Who thinks they will maybe write a line of code in the future ever? Oh, that's fewer people, okay. Yeah, design background. Again. Who has ever drawn a picture? Who thinks they will maybe draw something in the future? Okay. Marketing people. Who has ever like told someone else about a product? Okay, cool. I think you'll figure out that every one of you is broader in their background than you usually think about. Another thing that I'm really excited about is that so many people showed up. Every time I'm in London or in San Francisco, you see the hubs work really well. And what they also have is a very strong product community. And we also have the Product Tank events in Vienna, but there's way fewer people who show up. So I think this is like one of the healthiest signals in a hub. If there are people who get product, why? Because there's often people arguing is it more important to have the technology, or is it more important to be able to sell the technology? And I think these are like the wrong ways to think about it, because in the end, it's a product of all these components. So it's kind of like a multiplication. And I think the hubs that get that the whole thing is like a product that is interwoven are the hubs that have silos broken up where people talk to each other. Okay, a little bit about me. I'm running product. I'm also the founder and the CEO of Blossom, which is a project tracking tool. It's used by around 500 organizations. One of them is Twitter, another one is Facebook, another one is Netflix. We also have Apple and NASA using us. That all was not planned. I can tell you that. But I wanted to talk about product roadmaps, and then I figured out, thinking about the talk, that's why I've never given it before, that talking about product roadmaps doesn't make a lot of sense without talking about product strategy. So I'll actually talk about product strategy and how to then left talking about product strategy is difficult because I have to talk about what has to happen that you can actually strategically implement a product roadmap. So I'll start with the first slide. It's kind of like a pop quiz. Who knows the people in the slide? I'll not spoil anything. It's from a series called Game of Thrones. These two, like, who likes the characters in the picture? Okay. Yeah, they're like ambiguous characters. I picked them because, or let's move back one slide. Why is product strategy interesting, especially for companies in Europe, product companies in Europe? Who is part of a product company that raised more than $100 million? We certainly are not. No one in the audience. I think one thing that Europe is still lacking is like a healthy venture capital scene. That's problematic, which means European product companies that have great talent don't have as many resources as the US competitors. But one cool thing when you think about it is, if your competitor gets more money, what will they do with the money? They'll usually hire more people. And one way to get ahead of your competition is usually not adding more people, it's making better decisions. And making better decisions is harder if you have more people. And so the thing you want to focus on actually and use as your unfair advantage is product strategy. Product strategy in a sense just means making the right decisions. And it's like, that sounds super simple, and it is simple, but it's not easy. It's just simple. That's why I wanted to talk a bit about the role of the product manager, or like the product person. Like, these two people in the Game of Thrones series have a lot of power, but they don't have formal power. So when you look at the product management role, usually in a company, they don't have the last word in a lot of categories. So usually there's a technology lead, or there's a marketing lead, or there are founders, then there's investors. There's people who lead support. Often the product people are the ones responsible if the things don't run well, but they're also not the people who have the authority to overrule other people. So just from the structural point of view of most companies, especially larger companies, they have silos to be very efficient, but that means that the product people usually are just responsible, but they don't have enough power to actually make the things happen. So they have to be very good people to get around these silos. And that's an advantage for smaller companies or European companies that understand that, because they don't have to create the same silos, and they can actually empower the product people a bit more. Let me see if I forgot something about the Game of Thrones slide. Another thing that they are so who are these people? They talk to everyone. They know everything. They know everything that is inside of the company, but they also talk to the enemies. So when you watch the series, there are no like clear good people or bad people. These roles not, and the other roles are also very ambiguous. But there are some people that only talk to some other people, and these people obviously talk to everyone, and they know everything. And I think that's kind of like the thinking you want to have as a product person, but also as a founder, that you also want to talk to your competitors. You want to talk to everyone, because usually the people who are your competitors, they know the market as well as you do. They are of all the people in the world, the people who care about the same problem as much as you do. You will not find people in the world who care as much about these aspects as your competitors. And you can thrive doing that. They also are very broad. They have broad knowledge, so they are not specialists. They are kind of like jacks and jills of all trades. All right. Next pop quiz slide. Who knows that series? It's like a bit more obscure. Okay, that's Babylon 5. It's like a sci-fi TV series. I'm not sure how successful it was. But there's one interesting aspect which I think I've seen all episodes, but I didn't realize that. I just read it up. Throughout so it's basically a space station where there's a lot of different alien people meet, and they do politics on that space station. And there are a few characters that always ask specific questions, and they're called the Babylon 5 questions. And they ask questions like, who are you? What do you want? Why are you here? Where are you from? Where are you going? Do you have anything worth living for? Then there's a spin-off series. They have two other questions. Whom do you trust? And whom do you serve? And I think with this slide, I want to tell you that if you want to implement product strategy, you have to have like some kind of framework that you want to implement. So I think the product role there, like if you're a product person, you make product decisions, but you're kind of like an artist or a chef. There's no right and wrong. If I say I want to serve pasta without anything, then that's my intention, that's my strategy. There will be some people who like it, maybe no one, but I made the right decision. So it's always the right decision. Same with music, same with art. It's more about your intentions. And usually, when you talk to companies, you'll find out they don't even really know what their intentions are. So these Babylon 5 questions are like some questions that you can ask sometimes or like regularly. And if I meet people for a coffee, like I'll just pick one of these questions, and it's a good conversation starter. You will find they're really hard to answer. They're like easy questions, but hard to answer, and they will evolve over time, but it's like interesting if you want to like start like a creative session. Who knows this guy? That's kind of related. Another thing that comes into your way, like kind of like an inhibitor to actually implementing a product strategy, is not knowing enough about the people you work with, or not knowing enough about your customers, not knowing enough about your competitors. And I think this guy in this like detective series is a good image to have in mind how you kind of want to operate when you talk to other people. So what he's doing actually is having a very easygoing conversation where actually the murderers will actually trip up and tell him everything. And he's actually looking for facts. He's collecting facts very rigorously. So he has a very lightweight conversation style, but he's very diligent in actually establishing facts that are true, like profound truth. That's basically the whole customer development part of product. So there's like there's a cool book about customer development. There's slide decks. There's the MOM test. I would really look into that aspect. Something I skipped for a long time, and that was not a good idea. So Columbo is another thing to keep in mind that can inhibit you from actually implementing a product strategy. So you think you have a product strategy and then you don't know enough. Columbo is the image that gives you more information. Kind of related to that, that's another TV series. Who knows that one? Made a comeback. It's not as good as it used to be. It's always like that. Similar to that, they also try to establish facts. But when you look like into the characters, Scully is the one trying to establish facts. The scientific, rigorous person, the person that actually, like maybe the metrics person, the KPI person, the one that tries to like make the fog go away. And Mulder, the other person, he is the one that is like just profoundly optimistic. And I think you want to have both traits. It gets a bit more concrete. Why I picked this image because you have a lot to do with something called like backlogs or issue trackers, and these are for software teams, I think, the same thing what for Scully and Mulder the X files are. So they have these packages of files, and they are endless. There's an infinite amount of files that got filed. One thing that helped me to think about backlogs is they will never become smaller. If they become smaller, something's wrong. Because then people stop having ideas, or you stop getting feedback. And it's okay that the backlog is not getting smaller, or like the icebox, or however you want to call these lists. And it's okay not to implement all of the things that are in there, and it's okay to not prioritize them, because it's impossible to prioritize them if they are endless, and they usually are endless. That's maybe a very, I'm leaning way out there now. How I see these issue tracking tools is actually they are like the X files. So there is a reason why they file the X files, because they are containers of evidence, and they help you make decisions, and they help you establish context and cross-reference things. But you cannot solve every case because you don't have enough information. You don't have unlimited resources. You don't have enough resources to solve all of them. But you want to solve some of them, and you have the resources and means to solve some of them, and you have the means to solve some of them quickly, some of them really well, and establish more information and get to another point in your journey. And then suddenly the whole X-files look different again. I'll get back to how to think about prioritization in a bit. But I'll get to that's the last pop culture slide. Who knows that one? Okay, that's Gizmo from Gremlins. Another problem that you have to work with as a product manager that gets into your way of implementing a strategy are bugs. So one thing that happens, and it's similar with like prioritization problems, sprint backlogs, sprint prioritizations, there's always the tendency that there's bugs that creep into your strategic thinking. So there is there are endless conversations about whether it's more important to fix this bug or rather work on that feature, or depending on who is leading the team or who the founders are, you'll find people that are like, let's not think about the bugs right now, let's ship this feature, or you'll find the polar opposite. And I found one way to solve this problem is to get out of this granular problem of trying to establish which thing is more important, because it's really complicated to trade off new value delivered through a strategic feature you want to implement and value delivered through fixing a problem you have in the product, because you have to think about, is this a feature that gives you PR? Is this a bug that is in the beginning of the journey of the customers? Is it a problem for onboarding? Is it a problem for experienced users? There's so many aspects to get right that you just cannot make this trade-off, and you can have endless discussions that destroy the whole team. So an easy fix for that is having something called service level agreements, where you basically say for every sprint or for every time window, let's say every quarter or every month, you agree on how much development effort will be for new feature development and how much development effort will be for maintenance. Let's say it's 50-50. That's a good start, because then no one kills you. But like depending on how the code base looks like, how the user experience looks like, other trade-offs make sense. And then you suddenly only have to argue about what is the queue that feeds into the maintenance service level, and what is the queue that feeds into strategy. And suddenly all these discussions go away, at least the ones that are between maintenance and new feature development. And all that said, I think one thing that helps, getting back to the roadmap thing now, one thing that helps to make better strategic decisions than your competitors is when you try to think about product decisions as something that, like, you're a director of a TV series. And that's something I didn't come up with. I stole that from Jack Dorsey, who ran product at Twitter and at Square, payment provider. And he basically said product managers are something like, I think, movie editors or editors in general. And I think what he meant with that is when you look at, like, let's say a Game of Thrones season or a new Batman movie, there's a lot of ideas you can have that you put in there. I mean, I could think of, let's have like 10,000 dragons. That's cool. Or maybe there's a new continent that appears. Or maybe Batman finds out there's another Batman somewhere else. Or like, there's a lot of things you can put into the story. It's the same thing with the product, but it has to make sense, and directors deliberately leave some things out. So they're editing. They're saying this goes in, the other things don't go in. And if you take that into this thinking of having a season, maybe for your product that's a quarter or like a year or whatever time frame you use, you can decide what the theme of that quarter is. So if we say the theme is we want to focus on onboarding, then suddenly you don't, like, if you had a product backlog, you tried to prioritize, and we said this quarter we look at onboarding, that you have to reprioritize the whole product backlog. But then it kind of like makes sense because you have some context, some agreed upon thing that you're actually prioritizing on. And then suddenly you'll find if you have this theme you focus on, there are some things that you always thought would be a good idea to ship, but they never reached the top of the priority. So how I think about product strategy is having something, let's say we take a month or a week or a quarter, whatever time frame makes sense for you, and you pick a theme that makes sense. Maybe it's a meta theme, and then there's 2 or 3 sub themes to it, and they're interwoven like a story. And then you pick things that fit into that theme, and suddenly you'll find there's fewer discussions. You'll find the same team can deliver better results just because they're aligned and they understand the context and they can immerse themselves into like what they're thinking about. So I'm not saying throw prioritization away, but I think having some, like just establishing more context is the thing that is actually making one product better than the other product. And I think getting back to that beginning, actually, how to get better at that is actually very simple. Again, you come to meetups like this, you talk to other product people, you grab coffee, you grab beer, and you think about your own products and the decisions you want to make, and you think about the products that other people have, and you run through these decisions, and you will find making decisions for other products is way easier than making decisions for your own products. And this way, you'll make way more decisions than you used to make. And once you've made like hundreds or thousands of decisions, you'll get better and better and better and better. And I think I'm just starting to realize how much way I still have to go. But I think the meetup is a great start, and just seeing that you came here is the best thing that can happen. So thanks a lot. Last slide is just a Facebook Messenger code. If you haven't seen that yet, you can scan it, or you can Google me. You can contact me anytime you want. I'll also put the slides online. They will not be meaningful to anyone except you, because there's no text in it. I usually say, like, just contact me if you have product questions. If you drop by in Vienna or London or San Francisco, want to meet up. Usually, less than 5% of an audience actually add me, and few of that, like, and only a couple of people then actually take me up on that offer. So it's a chance for you to be more than 5%. Yeah. Thanks a lot. Thank you.
I'm trying to open it up again for questions. Don't go, please. Any questions? I do have a question. I hope it will break the ice. So you said setting up a team can help you with prioritization, right? But how do you prioritize your team?
It's a very good question, because that's the thing I tried to leave out. Yeah, it's difficult. It's again, I think, the same challenge that you have with prioritizing granular features. And it will be an easier decision because there's usually fewer themes to pick from. Like, for issues, you have thousands. For themes, there might be fewer. But I think the challenge with picking a theme is you then know the other themes are not on for the next month. And that's then you feel the opportunity cost, and you feel how much that hurts to say, we'll not work on this aspect of the product for 1 month. And I think that's the hardest part. I think there is, again, no easy way to say what is the right order or not, because that depends on what you actually want to achieve, or like maybe it's timed with other releases of what other people are doing. Maybe like, let's say when Facebook announced the Messenger platform 4 weeks ago, if you have a good, if you have a good team, it might have changed the next theme, right? Does not have to be, but there can be external factors where you say, okay, we'll focus on that because now we can get a lot of PR and we can be the first that they'll push on the platform. So I don't have a good answer for that. Yeah, we tried to do that, and then we found that not all things were finished, and then we extended the theme. But the idea is that you have some kind of cadence, and it usually depends. Like if it's an early stage product, then you might want to have shorter themes and maybe actually no themes in the very beginning, just to avoid too much structure and bureaucracy. And maybe like once the product is more established and it's further down the life cycle, you have like quarterly themes or maybe yearly themes. And it's kind of like, if you want to look into like literature, you can look at what Google is doing and Intel is doing with the OKRs, objectives and key results. It's kind of like a similar concept of forcing you to limit the focus of what you're doing to achieve alignment. It's the same concept in a sense. And they are kind of strict about ending them at a specific time frame. So I would recommend to try to have this cadence, but I know that it's hard to keep. So we have some, like one example that I had is like we use quarterly theme names, and then I write kind of like a script of what is happening in that theme and why we chose that. And then it's suddenly clear why some things don't fit into the theme. So it's suddenly easier to say no to good ideas. If you have an investor or a co-founder and they're like, but we should totally do this, then it's easier to say, yes, it's a great idea, but it doesn't fit this theme. And it's not, again, you don't granularly fight over whether it's a good idea or not. You don't want to fight over whether it's a good idea. Getting back to what happens if you don't meet the deadline or something like that, I think Apple has actually a funny precedence for that. They had this release called Leopard, like the Mac OS X release, Leopard, and the next one was Snow Leopard. So I think like kind of what happened there was they didn't get all in Leopard, and they fixed a lot of infrastructure things. And they said, okay, we don't even have to announce anything because nothing changed for the user. And then they called it Snow Leopard. So I think there is a way similar to TV series or movies where you can finish a story arc that is still open and open something new.
What's your ideal organization? New features?
I don't think there's a non-answer. Sorry. I think there's not an ideal ratio because, like, let's say you join a team and you find there's like huge infrastructure problems, and it's like maybe it's a political reason, and actually there are people who wanted to clean things up, but there was never the power to do it. Then the service level agreements suddenly are a good way to sneak something in, and then you can start with maybe even only 30% maintenance, and it's suddenly way more than was ever there. And then over time, you can, whenever there's again granular decisions where people say, but let's get this in as well, then you can always lift it up and say, let's talk about the service level agreements. Do you mean we should like decrease this or increase that? So I think of it more as a tool to avoid politics or clear politics up than the specific ratio. I think having the service level agreements is way better than not having them. But it probably also depends on the life cycle of the product. And in the beginning, there's maybe fewer bugs than you just build features. Okay. Yeah, thanks a lot. Thank you.